You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkmann. For many immigrants, deciding to make a home thousands of miles away in a new country means leaving family behind. And you might not be there for big moments, births, celebrations, even deaths. It was by pure chance that Vikram Prakash was in India in his hometown of Chandigarh when his father, the architect Aditya Prakash, passed away.
I put the phone down. My mother, who had been standing beside me all along, asked softly, "Kya baat hai? Kya hua? What is the matter? What happened?" I led her to one of the teakwood lounge chairs the modernist had designed in the 1960s, in the so-called genre style. The chair's angle forced the body back, though she resisted, straining to lean forward. I sat directly in front of her, took her hands in mine, and said, "Mummy, the modernist had a heart attack in Ratlam. He is no more."
His death wasn't just a family tragedy. In many ways, it represented the end of an era for his nation. Aditya Prakash was one of India's most notable modern architects. He worked on the design of the city of Chandigarh with vaunted French architect Le Corbusier. The city is now considered a living laboratory for modernism, climate responsiveness, and post-independence social transformation.
The phrase that I like to use is Chandigarh was sustainable before sustainability became a big thing.
Prakash writes about his father's death and bringing his body home in a new book called Death of a Modernist. You just heard him reading a short passage of it. Vikram Prakash had written textbooks before in his role as a professor of architecture at the University of Washington, but Death of a Modernist represented something new. The book is short, under 60 pages. It's part memoir, part fiction, part primer on Indian architecture. Prakash developed the story out of nightly notes he took in 2008 at the time of his father's death.
Every day at night before I went to sleep, I'd open my laptop and I'd make a journal of everything that happened. Just a long journal. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Just, I think, because I wanted to not forget it.
Later, a publisher asked him to contribute to a series of novellas. Initially, she thought he might write something fun and gossipy because those are the types of stories Prakash tends to tell.
But I told her, I have a very different book that I might want to write if you're interested. And she gave me a carte blanche. She said, "Oh, yeah, just write whatever you'll write and write it." So I pulled out those notes, and I have this wonderful home on Orcas Island. I sat there one day, and in 1 week, I wrote the whole thing.
Vikram Prakash joined me in the studio recently to talk about his new book and contemporary architecture in the Pacific Northwest. And stay tuned because one of his favorite buildings in Seattle might surprise you. We're going to dive right into the rest of our conversation now. So for people who are not in the architecture world, could you just place us first in Chandigarh and tell us about the city that your father helped design? What is important about Chandigarh? And if you are walking the streets, what do you see? What do you notice about the city and its design?
So Chandigarh is a famed modernist city. It was built in the 1950s and designed by surely the biggest name in global architectural modernism, Le Corbusier. But that's not the main part of the story. The main part of the story is that when India became independent in 1947, the country was also partitioned into Pakistan and India. And a consequence of that was that one of the states called Punjab was divided into two. And the old capital of the state, which was a historic city called Lahore, went to Pakistan. So the Indian half of the state needed a new capital. And the first Prime Minister of independent India, who was also the architect of how the Indian nation state was to be constructed and has been constructed, Jawaharlal Nehru decided that they're going to build a new city. And not only are they going to build a new city, they're going to make a modernist city. So that India's first attempt at showing how it builds for itself is not backward-looking, but forward-looking. So that's how this city got made. And so now when you go over there, it embodies some of the most advanced architectural design and planning principles with a well-organized hierarchy of road systems, supplemented by fantastic bicycle and pedestrian paths, and what are known as the lungs of the city, a series of interconnected green belts, with each neighborhood being organized in a very distinctive manner so that anybody can get to the essential amenities within about 5 minutes. So it's a fabulously organized city. And all its architecture is in what is known as mid-century modernist style from the 1950s, very simply made out of brick and a little bit of concrete. And since the budget to build the city was almost zero, one of the distinctive things about the city is that all its architecture is designed to be cool as possible in summer, through ventilation and shading. So it is the phrase that I like to use is Chandigarh was sustainable before sustainability became a big thing. And it functioned that way for a very long time. I mean, it's different forces at play today, but that's roughly the ethos of the city even today. It still is one of the most coveted cities in North India to live in.
And how did your father, Aditya Prakash, end up working with Le Corbusier in order to design this city? He studied in London, right?
Yeah.
But tell us the story of how that happened.
So in August 1415, the famous stroke of the midnight hour, when India became independent, my father was on a ship on his way to London to study architecture. And he was there until 1952. And he was practicing there, but he was sort of unhappy because he didn't really feel like he was, there was all kinds of racism at play, I think, let's say. And then he heard that this brand new city was being built at Nehru's command in India. And moreover, he found out that it was to be designed by what was in those days, and by his own admittance, if you read his journals. He actually kept journals every day from 1945 to 59. So they're all in his archives in Canada.
Amazing.
Le Corbusier was one of the people he idolized. And everybody, like he was the big name. He once went down to Paris just to try and meet him. And he went to his office. They admitted him to this office, allowed him to see the whole office. And they said, no, Corbusier is too busy to meet you. And so he went away, and he was like, didn't have the courage to. So when he heard that not only was it a Nehruvian city, but it was also to be designed by a team led by Corbusier, who had two British architects, Maxwell Fry and Jane Drew, working with him. And he knew Maxwell Fry from his days in London. So he wrote to Maxwell Fry and he said, hey, listen, I heard you're looking for trained architects to design the city. So the initial team was 8 Indian architects and planners who were selected to work with this team, where the explicit intention written into the contract was that once they leave, this team would take over the design and planning of the city. So that's how we joined the project in 1952.
And what were some of the signature projects within the city that your father designed, if you could pick out a few?
He was a theater man. He loved theater. I think he was very shy and reticent. His mother died young, and so he felt quiet. So typically in people like that, he sort of overperformed on stage. He loved to be on the stage, which is why I also love to be on the stage. I love to, so he was very quiet.
When you get in front of a microphone or you get on a stage, you can be a different person, right?
Totally. Yeah. You totally take on a persona.
Yep.
It's perfect, right?
Yeah.
Or in the classroom, you should try that. And it's
no. No,
it's perfect. Because you have a captive audience, and they have to laugh at your jokes, because what else are they going to do? Anyway, so I'm very happy in the classroom. So he loved theater. And he spent his evenings every day, because theater is free in London. Even today, a lot of theater is free, state supported. So he loved it. So he designed a well-known, in 1962, it was the birth centenary of Rabindranath Tagore, Indian novelist, Nobel Prize-winning literature novelist. And he designed a theater. Theaters in his name were built throughout India, and the one in Chandigarh were designed by my father. And that was an iconic building, completely well known for its design qualities. But once he started designing theaters, he also designed all the cinema halls. These gigantic Cinerama-style big Indian cinema halls. Bollywood is massive.
Oh,
massive.
yes.
It's the big thing. So he designed the big cinema halls in the city, 3 of them. And 2 of them were very, very, very much designed to, in a sense, fit into the Corbusier grid. Corbusier had this grid laid out in the city center. Then these 2 were kind of fitted into it. Although internally, if you think about a theater, it has to have a certain acoustic quality, which means a lot of curves and turns and so on and so forth. So always in any theater, there's a box on the outside, but then on the inside, it's a very curvilinear form that actually makes the acoustic qualities work. So he designed the first 2 in that manner. But then in his 3rd theater, he said, forget about the box. He just got rid of the box outside. And the 3rd theater, a wonderful building called KC Theater, was just one beautiful continuous curve, a complete standout structure in the otherwise gridded, relentless visual landscape of the city. Mm. So, and I'm using the word was because it's been destroyed. It came down.
Yeah, you wrote about that in the book. And I wonder, the book is this moment of a personal journey and a journey by your father's body also to get home. It's a personal journey to sort of come to terms with the fact that he is gone. There's also the wider reflection on how Chandigarh has changed and some of the battles that your father maybe fought, but ultimately, time moves on and, buildings like that theater, end up not surviving. I wonder, how did you start to kind of look at the city differently when you were processing your father's death?
Yeah, let me say that a subtext of the book is the question of the death of modernism. There's a famous 1950s book called The Language of Postmodern Architecture, which glorifiedly announced the death of modernism with the destruction of the Pruitt-Igoe Towers in St. Louis. It's a famous image of these social housing which had become infested with drugs, and they were demolished. They are in Koyaanisqatsi also by Godfrey Reggio. So they were taken as icons of the death of modernism. And after that came this sort of other style of architecture, which is called postmodernism, which was about buildings that had a certain language. So, for instance, our original Seattle Art Museum here downtown by Robert Venturi, which is very much with the big lettering on top of it, is a postmodern building. So in modern architecture, it's only the function that follows. So a subtext
you might see like columns arriving back in postmodernism, things that harken back to a prior time.
Yeah, they refer like this is the kind of building. So like today also there is this move to make the buildings of state in DC, for instance, they should have a certain kind of a character. You're perhaps hearing about that. Mm-hmm. It's they're anti-modernist, postmodern kind of thinking. So, and this started in the 80s, late 70s and 80s, in the sort of rise of neo-conservatism. And Chandigarh used to be one of the favorite whipping boys of the postmodernist architectural commentators. They used to say, and Chandigarh, oh my God, one of the worst places, complete failure of a city. Used to be a thing you used to hear all the time. And I was a kid then. And for a long time, I sort of wore Chandigarh like an albatross around my neck. Like I'm from Chandigarh and modernism. It was only much later, like literally into the early 2000s, and I said, oh my God, maybe the news of the death of modernism was a little premature. And in the new world that we are emerging in, now that we have sort of And architecturally, because our focus is now more on, climate responsive architecture, in architecture that performs much better in terms of its functional requirements. And we are going back to an ethos of architectural design and thinking that's not about social codes and convention, but is more about the performance of the structure. And we are returning to making buildings that are, passively cooled, passively heated, that use very little energy. This was just ordinary design in Chandigarh in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. In early 70s, my father was designing cities that had composting, animal-human relations, recycling, and food, what we call today food security, like food would be grown right where it's eaten. All these
like
things.
Urban gardens.
Urban gardens. We call them. All these things were just quote-unquote utopian urban plans of the early 70s in his work. So we are coming back to all of this. So in a sense, I don't know what exactly I'm trying to say, but I'm trying to play around with this idea that the death of the modernist also, in a sense, resurrects the question of the supposed death of modernism. And I try and not provide a, perfect answer to that question, but I try to resurrect that question and say, maybe that still lives.
You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkmann, and you're hearing from Vikram Prakash, a University of Washington professor of architecture and the author of the new book, Death of a Modernist. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about architecture a little closer to home, the streets of Seattle and the University of Washington campus through an architect's eyes. More in a moment on KUOW. Welcome back to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkmann, and we'll dive right back into my conversation with Vikram Prakash. His new book is called Death of a Modernist. It's a moving work about his father, the noted Indian modernist Aditya Prakash. And Vikram is also a professor of architecture at the University of Washington. That's where our conversation picks back up. In your teaching, in your classes, what do you notice about the types of design that students are drawn towards? I mean, obviously what you mentioned, the climate responsiveness, urban planning, that's, we always talk about the 15-minute city these days, which sounds like Chandigarh is, very much in line with. What kinds of things do you notice from your students in terms of where the direction of, the interest in architecture is moving?
Libby, I'm going to be a bit of a downer here, I think.
Oh, no.
But I think that all these questions, rather than being naturally, fully, and completely integrated into the basics of design every day, all the time, have been morphed into technological questions. We want to make high-tech buildings that have very fancy glass,
smart homes,
smart everything, and specially engineered lumbers and so on. And all these are, not things I am opposed to, all right? But somehow we have produced a technologized solution as the only path forward. Whereas what I try and suggest often enough to my students, and not always very successfully, is that, look, basic design is already sustainable. And let's just think about going back to that, and let's re-look at modernism. But I'm afraid modernism is still quite a bad word in schools of architecture. Nobody sort of actively. I go around saying I'm a card-carrying modernist.
Proudly.
The
albatross is off.
Albatross is off now. I'm a proud card-carrying modernist, and I think that that's very important, not only for architectural reasons, but also for a series of, I think, political reasons. We gave up a lot of the fights in the 60s and 70s. By the 70s, all the fights of the 60s were given up. I consider all those the modernist battles. And they are becoming extremely urgent today. If we are to imagine ourselves living on one planet, we need a different conception of society, of humanity, of what our place on Earth in the solar system. and all the fragmentation that has taken place in the 90s and 2000s is out of a refusal of a larger universalist point of view. So the modernists were devoted to universalist thinking, and they were strung up for that. Now we are all about, individuals, particulars, differences, localities, and very all this kind of stuff. But that has come with the cost, that we are not attuned to thinking about what it means to be on one planet.
Is modernism a more democratic way of thinking about laying out a city, about building things?
It claims to be much more democratic, but it's sort of, more, I would say, more egalitarianist. And egalitarianist in a more planet-first sense. But modern architecture is much more about radically rethinking our relationship to nature. The modernists did not like the old cities of Europe in particular, because they said they are medieval cities designed to be protected and defended and clan distributed. Now you can retrofit them, and they look really good, and they're wonderful for tourism. I love being in, Amsterdam or whatever. I love them. They're great, gorgeous.
But it's a museum.
And America in particular, our mission was to, do things ab initio, all from the beginning. So modernist thinking came out of that.
What do you want somebody to walk away from your book with, the reader, either about your father or Chandigarh or modernism writ large? Is there one takeaway that you wish, people would walk away from Death of a Modernist with?
Well, I hope the takeaway is that modernism's an incomplete project. It's unfinished, and it's become more urgent than ever. I'd just say that. That's my hope. That's what I try and teach now, and I write about, that we have to restore our faith in a kind of thinking which has been lost over the last 2 or 3 decades.
Before we go, can we pivot a little bit to Seattle architecture? I'd love to get a couple of your hot takes.
Okay.
You seem concerned about that.
I'm nervous, but let's go.
So do you have a favorite building in Seattle?
Oh, absolutely. No questions about it. It's, 2, actually. Can I do 2?
Yes, you can do 2.
Of course, the one I love because of its exaggerations is Rem Koolhaas's library, the big library downtown.
The Central Library.
The Central Library. Just amazing building. And theoretically, conceptually, spatially, and even the way it's constructed, it blows my mind. But as a card-carrying modernist,
yes,
my other most favorite building is what used to be called the Faculty Club on University of Washington campus.
I don't know if I went to the University of Washington. I can't recall it specifically.
That's right. Most people don't know about it. It's
Tell me more.
Right next to Hall Health.
Okay, yes.
You went to Hall Health?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so just next to Hall Health is this rather unassuming steel frame building with huge glass panels, with a ramp that leads up to it. And you go inside, then it has a courtyard. Yes.
It does stand out.
Well, it's very unassuming, but it's like a classic of modernism, where it is about touching the ground lightly, presenting itself as if it's almost not there, and producing an experience of being in the landscape that, I love Suzzallo and all our beautiful collegiate Gothic late 19th century buildings, for what they look like. You don't feel like you are here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
When you're in those buildings, they just close around you, right?
On most of the campus, there is that throwback to that kind of Gothic style. Like, you're walking in a painting of a Northeastern college, a Northeastern sort of collegiate enclave with the bricks and the fluting and just sort of like a throwback. But this building is very different. Does Seattle have a signature architectural style, or the Pacific Northwest?
Well, we talk about it. We talk about a Pacific Northwest modernism, and there are, a lot of architects, including Victor Steinbruch and so on. and Victor Steinbrück was one of the architects of the faculty club, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, our Space Needle, Victor Steinbrück, the market,
Oh, wow.
Victor Steinbrück, who was also the chair of the Department of Architecture, by the way, in the early 70s. So they were modernists of the 50s, 60s, and they basically, I think they practiced a modernism which they thought was the best way to build over here. Now, retrospectively, we describe it something as a Pacific Northwest modernism because we want to sort of give it a local flavor to it, which is fine. I have no issues with that. It has become morphed into something over the last, I'd say, 2 decades or so, into something which we call tectonics. I don't know if you have noticed, we have a lot of our newer buildings from the late 90s and 2000s have this very strongly exaggerated display of how the column holds up the beam.
Oh, yes.
And will be a very demonstrated sort of connection joint. We make a big deal about craft and construction. So this is our Pacific Northwest
There's a lot of engineers here.
Engineers, craftsmen, and
we like
there's
to be reminded that things are strong.
And there's a woodworking tradition, from the 19th century onwards, since this is the lumber city from the, white settler days from the 19th century. So there's a woodworking tradition, people like Nakashima, etc. So we like that. We like to celebrate construction and joinery. And that also gives us a Japanese connection, which we've always had, around here. So all these are good. But I think a lot of these things got constructed as part of the need to build a distinctiveness to the Pacific Northwest architectural language, which is not necessarily the case when you look at the buildings from the 50s and 60s, which are just modernist.
I'll tell you one thing, talking to some friends that are architects, that they wish they could change if they could wave a magic wand, is this tendency to add things to building, either like, fake brick facades or decorative columns or things that are just not actually functional, which strikes me as kind of a modernist lens on things, because modernism is all about function first. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the design of buildings today, do you have one thing that you wish you could either banish forever or alter in people's planning?
The one thing I would do is, I would particularly strip off all. We have this rule about that if you keep the supposed facade of one of the buildings in, let's say, the Pine Corridor or whatever, then you get this extra height and extra square feet that you can build.
It's kind of a loophole.
Thank you. We think it's a brilliant preservation, community character preserving idea. And I think it's a good idea if you're in medieval Europe or something like that, that you keep the facade and build behind. There it works. But over here, I think it's done, in my personal opinion. Some of my colleagues will come gunning for me later on. But it's done a terrible job. Because we get these very thin facades, and then we get these horrible real estate maximized structures behind them. Let's just get rid of all of that and demand high quality architecture. Just by keeping a facade, we give them a carte blanche to put whatever nonsense they want behind it. Instead, we should just demand good architecture with all the sustainable principles, but also with high quality thinking about the urban environment, which is why in fact, one of the reasons why I love REM's Central Library downtown, because the way it moves and bends and turns and shapes itself around, it not only creates some public spaces, it also challenges the very simple idea of a steady envelope for every block. Every block doesn't have to end in the same way. You can, move things around and create a more exciting experience of being in a city.
But as you say, that's not maximizing every square inch, right? And that's part of, one of the problems that we face, I think, right now in terms of kind of the cookie cutter look of a lot of what's going up. Well, I could absolutely talk to you all day, Professor. This has been such a delight. Really wonderful to talk to a card-carrying modernist. Vikram Prakash, professor of architecture at the University of Washington, architecture historian. His new book is called Death of a Modernist. And you can meet him at Elliott Bay Bookstore on Capitol Hill on July 31st. You're doing a reading, I understand.
Yes.
And I just really, truly thought the book was a special read and very quick read for folks who I want to add to their mini library. Vikram, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.